Local productions seen on Delta College Public Media are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Junia Doan's The Spark. Thank you for joining us. Today, I will be speaking with Chance Leonard, Senior Vice President at Skeletal Dynamics and Hall of Fame inducted wrestler and producer of his upcoming documentary, The Price of Legacy, Wrestling with a Dynasty. Welcome, Chance. How did you get into wrestling, Chance?
Well, Junia, number one, thank you for allowing me to be a guest on your show today. I was very privileged to grow up in a town where wrestling is very important. I grew up in a family that had been participating in wrestling well before I was born. And so it was a natural for me to be a part of a program that had committed in a town that had committed the resources and the time to help develop young kids through the sport of wrestling and to carry on a tradition that has never been, and I don't think ever will be duplicated for what the small town of Perry, Oklahoma has done in the sport of wrestling.
And Perry, Oklahoma is home to the wrestling team that for over 100 years has been state champions with no more than 2 years gap between the last time they were state champions. And your father was one of the few coaches. Is that why you were in Perry? Because he took a job there? Or was he from Perry?
Actually, my father was from Perry, Oklahoma. He grew up in the program that was started in 1922. And he is one of only 12 coaches that have coached in the program's history. And so, as I say, it was a natural for me to participate because of his past participation, both in the high school program and at college in Colorado and at Michigan State. And so him being a head coach allowed me and afforded me the opportunity to have a lot of mentors at a young age and participate in the sport because I was always at practice.
At what age did your father sort of introduce you to either wrestling or other sports?
Yeah, great question. Actually, I think as soon as I left the hospital, I already had a wrestling singlet, some headgear, and was introduced to the sport, which most kids in Perry are introduced at a very young age. I think I was on the mat at 4 and 5 years old and started not only practicing, but attending tournaments at a very young age.
And you have like a lot of physical energy. Is that something you had to build up in yourself or tap into?
I think it's a combination of both. Growing up, certainly kids have a lot of energy, and channeling that energy is something that is learned. The sport of wrestling certainly helped me with that. And it has, because it's learned and because it's habitual, I think it is continued well into, the decades that I've been alive. And I try to utilize that to bring energy to my professional career, as well as just even personal things that I like to do. I'm very, very active in the sport of triathlon and just being physically fit as much as possible.
We'll come back to that, but tell us about the film.
Yes, ma'am. This film is a passion project and an opportunity for me to truly give back to my coaches, my teachers, my mentors, my teammates. Growing up in Perry, Oklahoma was a privilege because I learned a lot about work ethic and I learned a lot from the sport of wrestling. And this is, for me, a tangible way, I think, that I can say thank you. And the town of Perry, Oklahoma has its complete identity wrapped up in the sport of wrestling. As you know, they've committed to it for the last 100 years. There are many traditions. There are many streaks that will never, ever be duplicated in the sport. And so my film is called The Price of Legacy, Wrestling with a Dynasty. And it's about this 100-year-old wrestling program that has achieved at the highest levels. But most importantly, it's an opportunity to tell a story of how and why it continues to be as successful as it is. Since 1961, they've never gone more than 2 years without winning a team state title. And for the last 29 years, they have never finished lower than third in the team state championships. And so it's very, very significant. We've got a national record number of team state championships at 43 out of the last 98 years. We have 188 individual state champions. We've got an Olympic gold medalist, an Olympic silver medalist, and the Heisman Trophy of NCAA college wrestling is called the Hodge Trophy, and it's named after Perry's own Danny Hodge.
And what do you think wrestling teaches someone who's successful at it?
I think the most important things that wrestling teaches are character traits. Number one, the commitment that you make in order to be successful in the sport is paramount. Number two, the persistence that it requires, just staying involved and having faith that you're going to continue getting better, even when it's really, really challenging. I think discipline is one thing that this sport teaches far better than any other sport, because not only do you have to, endure the grueling workouts that come along with it, but you also have to push away from the table in order to make an ideal weight. And you also have to push away from actually fluid intake while you're cutting weight. There's two different aspects to the dietary process in the sport of wrestling. There is losing weight, which is done consistently over a period of time. And then there's cutting weight in order to finally, make the weigh-in scale before you wrestle. And so I think those are the three most important things that this sport teaches. And one last thing I think that I would add is perseverance. You're going to get knocked down, and practices are going to be very difficult. And you're going to lose some matches along the way, but it does teach you to get up. It teaches you to shake the hand of your opponent and recognize that the responsibility is on each individual wrestler, not only to compete, but in order to win.
I took that away from the movie, to get up. If you're down, get up and start again. Great life lesson. Great life lesson. So what happened after wrestling or after high school in your life?
Well, I actually wanted to go to medical school after college, but I learned pretty quickly in my first year of school at the Air Force Academy that I didn't want to be a pilot, and there was a lot of people much smarter than me at school. And I wanted to be an athlete in college, and not that you can't do that at the Air Force Academy. I personally wasn't a fit. And so after I transferred back to the University of Oklahoma, I had an opportunity to try to achieve my goals of becoming an NCAA champion and All-American at the University of Oklahoma. I'm plagued by some injuries that just prohibited me, I think, from achieving my ultimate goals. But I took from wrestling all of the things that I mentioned a little bit earlier and applied them to my professional life. I had a lot of injuries in college, and my orthopedic surgeons who were taking care of me said, medical school is probably not for you, but you should, look at the medical device industry. And so I got involved in that shortly after graduating from college. And for the last 26 years, that's where I've spent all of my professional career.
How did you start finding a company that was doing what you wanted? When one of these coaches or one of these doctors told you?
Yes, ma'am. I was very, very fortunate that there were, relationships established between the surgeons that I was seeing at the time, and they introduced me to people that were in a position to actually be able to hire talent. And I recognized that what I would bring to the table was enthusiasm and passion, and the willingness to learn, and certainly my skills that I learned in the sport of wrestling, being a competitor, and willing to make sacrifices in order to achieve that, propelled me to obtaining my first role in the medical device industry.
How did that happen?
Well, after I got connected to, as I say, a hiring manager, he actually told me not the news that I was hoping for. I said, "You need to have some experience. You need to apply some of the things that you've learned, and I'd like for you to bring me back some achievements in a couple of years." And for me, that was okay. You're challenging me. You may or may not think that I can actually do this, and so I actually took a role with a smaller company that required me to make a sacrifice and move from the state of Oklahoma. So I moved to Texas and spent 2 years gaining some very much needed experience, and most importantly, the achievements that could demonstrate a track record of success. And I brought those back to that same hiring manager, and he offered me a role with the company. And I spent 15 years at that company.
And what made you come back?
I apologize, to Oklahoma.
Skeletal.
Oh, I'm sorry. I came back
What
to.
became skeletal?
Yeah, I came back to the role with a company called Synthes, because they were very, very focused on one aspect of the orthopedic medical device industry. I was mesmerized by the opportunity to serve in the operating room. It fit my personality because I was willing to do things and make sacrifices that other people weren't willing to do. Part of that's being on call 24/7, 365. And that's a very, very hard lifestyle. As a matter of fact, my wife and I never drove in the same car anywhere because I would always get called into the operating room for some very challenging cases. But the opportunity to serve like that really fit my personality and what I'd learned through the sport of wrestling.
What were you supposed to be doing in the operating room?
What we do is provide guidance for the use of the medical devices in order to treat fractures. Surgeons obviously have a tremendous amount of training that they do through medical school and through a residency program. But there's been a proliferation, as you know, of innovations that help create better patient outcomes. And we are part of the team that helps create these better patient outcomes.
The field has become so refined and intricate these days. And I think it must be thrilling for you to see. It's like growing up in an industry.
It absolutely has. If you think about, even the 25, 30, even 50 years ago, orthopedic trauma care was in its infancy. And what has transpired since that time, especially through innovation, is tremendous. And these surgeons are able to give and provide outcomes to patients that now can walk, and they heal. And we've still got so much to still learn about the industry, but overall, the innovations have been tremendous, and there's been a lot of great outcomes for patients across the world.
Do you still hire people? Are you in that part of it?
Yes, ma'am. I've actually moved into more of an executive leadership role with my current organization, and I have the opportunity to make final decisions about who obtains a role with our organization.
So I read a lot about the younger generations just getting out of college or graduate school. They're interested in work-life balance. Does
Yes.
that become an issue for you, or the people you're looking for don't necessarily subscribe to that?
I would tell you that if work-life balance is something that is of major importance, then perhaps the medical device industry, especially with trauma indications, may not be the space for you in the medical device industry. But there are other parts of the medical world that provide opportunities that don't require the level of commitment to be in the operating room at any point in time. And so, the spine world is more scheduled cases. There's plenty of other areas that people can serve in that way. For us on our side, the requirement is the availability. I've really looked back over my career and tried to determine retrospectively what has helped me succeed. Certainly many things that I learned in the sport of wrestling and applying them moving forward has been tremendous. The first one is being available, physically and mentally, emotionally. I think there is an element of affability that you are willing to, be humble and to serve and recognize that you're not the most important person. The patient's actually the most important person. And that brings about a level of responsibility, or I would say accountability, to always be prepared and to serve in a capacity that people can count on you. You build trust, and lastly, attention to detail. Those are the four things that I find most important in how we communicate and how we serve and how we build trust.
How did you learn to get along with people? And how do you get along with very different personality types?
For me, that's always something that requires humility and willingness to listen. Being as competitive as I am, I think that's one of the biggest barriers. I would call it, at times it's a balcony situation, but there's also a basement element of it as well. And so I have to back away from a competitive side and wanting to win, and understand that collectively utilizing, the brain power and the abilities of all of my teammates is really crucial and influential to success.
What is the role of trust in leadership?
I think trust is paramount. It requires open levels of communication. I think people need to be able to share their opinions without fear of them being chided for what their thought process is. It doesn't mean that everything is always right, but I think once we have everything on the table, we can ensure that the best outcome is achieved because we work together and collaboratively. But communication is really important. For me, trusting in the people that I have hired and placed in particular positions, and allowing them to utilize their skill sets and their experiences in order to create organizational success. I think that is what is the most important things that I can do as an executive leader.
From your point of view, what makes for a good employee?
That's a great question. There are some very specific things that I think are most important. Character and integrity are paramount. Work ethic and I think perseverance and humility are really the essential elements to being a great employee. I personally have to model those things first. And as an example, I think people can utilize those things, and then we work together. But Education to me is very, very important. You have to be willing to learn. It's not always book smart. There's some street smart that is important in any occupation. And then, applying what I would consider the 4 A's of personal success, no matter what role that we have within an organization is important. And that's availability, affability, accountability, and attention to detail.
How do you train people in that coming new to the organization?
I think one of the most important things that we have to do from the beginning of an interview process is determine, are those traits already inherent in a candidate? I personally think that resumes are required, but they never tell the whole story. And through dialogue and through an interview process, you get to learn what people's backgrounds are. If they don't necessarily have some of the things that we require, we have to determine whether those things can be developed along the way. But some things are non-negotiable. Character and integrity are paramount and of the highest level of importance through the interview process. You can't teach people work ethic as well, especially as things have moved forward in life. And I think that, for somebody to answer, as I say, a pager or their phone at 3 o'clock in the morning in my industry is a requirement. And I remember when I first started working for the company that I mentioned a little bit earlier, I had a box of business cards that they gave me and I threw them away. And I knew I'd committed to, as I say, this 4 A's of service. So I went to Kinko's and I made a business card that was bright red. It had my name on it. It said 24/7, 365, and had my phone number. And that was it. And I always also endeavored to answer my phone, or back during those early days, I had a pager. And if I told people, if I don't return your call in 5 minutes, then I didn't receive your call, and to call me again. And so that level of commitment to availability has always served well. And I think people, at least coming into my industry, need to be able to exhibit those same qualities.
Boy, that's inspiring. So in an article about Jeff Bezos this week in the Journal, he talked about waking up. It's good for executives or employees to wake up scared every day because they're reaching to put things into reality that may or may not work out. That's the first time I've really seen a senior executive talk about the role of fear.
Yeah. I personally, I think everybody deals with fear a little bit differently. I think most competitive athletes will always talk about the fear of losing, but I think fear can be very detrimental. And I think we have to work from a place of confidence, and confidence is built by repetition and completion and building habits along the way. I think that, fear is utilized in different ways by certainly different people. Personally, I try to shy away from that because of my spiritual beliefs, and fear is not from the Lord. And for me, I think that, I try to utilize what I've been gifted with, to utilize that in a humble servant way. And most importantly, what I've learned. The things that for me that have helped make me successful are work ethic and commitment and perseverance and drive to be successful and serve in a way that differentiates. And I don't think fear is involved in that.
Would you say something about your spiritual life?
Absolutely. First and foremost, I'm a Christian. I committed my life to the Lord early on. I think that has really grounded me in my perspective, because no matter how much success that we have, it's not my success. It all should point to Jesus Christ. And so for me, I think that utilizing those teachings and constantly being willing to learn is something that continues to help develop me and the influence. I have a
How
lot
did
of
your
people.
wife take to your 24/7, 365 life?
That's well, let's just say it took a little bit of time to get used to. I will tell you, it started early, and I think that she was perhaps a little bit confused about why that requirement was there. Part of it is, instinctually in me, and part of it is a requirement of what I needed to do in order to be successful. I'll tell you a funny story. She called me literally 2 minutes before we were supposed to walk out and get married, and she said, "Why are you answering your phone?" I said, "I'm sorry, I've been doing this for a long time, and you're going to have to share me a little bit." And she said, "Okay, well, never mind. Just want to let you know I'm ovulating. I'll see you in a little bit."
That's funny and true.
Very
I
true.
think if you're going to build anything, you have to work all out.
Yes, ma'am.
That's just the nature of accomplishment.
Yeah.
And what did you try to teach your children?
First and foremost, I think number one, love them
Yes.
no matter what, and letting them know that, mom and dad are very, very proud of you, no matter what the result of, your academic or sports career is. We really want to underscore why that's really important, because, it's not our performance that matters most. Secondly, the character traits that we've spoken about here today, first and foremost, need to be modeled by us as parents first. And then secondly, passing that down to them and helping them, and putting them in specific situations where they have to persevere, where they have to, utilize commitment and utilize character, and really working with, other students and people in their class, and working well with them, and living in a life as an example to the Lord is most important.
Thank you, Chance. We're out of time, so I can't do a summary, but I suggest
Oh, wow.
everybody watch the tape again. Anyway, see you all next week. Do something kind for someone you know and someone you don't know, and have a good week.
To contact Junia, send her an email at juniadonsthespark@gmail.com. For more information, program schedules, and news about future guests, go to www.juniadonthespark.com. Thank you for joining us. See you next time on Junia Doan's The Spark.
Local productions seen on Delta College Public Media are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.